Cool. Now let's learn how to implement select all customers. And this is a little bit more involved, but once you understand, then it's super easy. In order for us to select a customer, we basically write the SQL statement. So here, so you always have the SQL statement. So SQL, and in here, what we're going to do is we're going to say select, and you would say star, but I prefer to use the columns. So here, ID, name, email, and I think it was age, and we could say from, and then customer, just like that. And now that we have the query, we could say JDBC template dot. And if you look into all of these methods, which one do you think that we should use? So have a look. So in here, so we've got query, we've got query for lists, we've got query that takes the SQL and whatnot. So actually we have to use query. It's basically telling you what you need to do, right? So let's just say query, and this actually returns a list. So that's what we want. So if you want a stream, you can do it with a stream. And basically then you can perform all the stuff that you can do with streams. But for us, we just want query, okay? So let's just say query. And query, there's a bunch of flavors, but the one that we want is the one that takes the SQL as well as the row mapper. And currently we have no arguments, so it will be this one here. So SQL and then the row mapper. And I'll explain the row mapper in a second. So let's now pass the SQL and then say comma. And now we have to pass the row mapper. Now this is actually a lambda that we can pass like so. So this row mapper in here, and this takes the result set and the row number. And we have to return, basically we have to extract the columns from the row mapper. But at the same time, we construct our customer. So let's in here say new and then customer. And for customer, we need to pass the ID. So the way that we get the ID is by saying rs get, and then here we want to get an integer because the ID is an integer, and the column index. So we could pass the actual index or the column name. So ID. Then we also say rs dot get. So the name is a string. So let's just say string, and the column name is name. We also need to get the age, rs dot get string, and then email. And finally rs dot and then get int. So the age is an integer. So here we could say age. Now here we could actually pass the column index if we want. So 1, 2, 3, 4, but it's best to grab the actual column names. And I'll explain this in a second. So if it is not making sense. So now that we have this guy right here, what we can do is we can extract this to a variable. So this will be our customer. And what we do now is we say return and then customer. And also let's just end this with semicolon there, and there we go. Now I'm going to explain this in a second. So this is just a row mapper in here, and in here if you want to extract this to a variable, you can do it. So if I basically take this in here and then just do this, extract this to a variable, you can see the keyboard shortcut in here. So this is the customer row mapper. So there we go. So customer row mapper, it's a lambda, and you've learned about lambdas, and basically it just returns a customer by grabbing the column contents for each row. And again, I'm going to explain this in a second. So this guy right here now gives us a list. So list of, and then customer, and then I'm going to say customers equals to, and here we could just return customers. And this is pretty much it. So you can see that this was a little bit more involved, but I'll explain this in a second. Let's just restart. And let's open a Postman. And let's send the get request, which before gave us a 200 but nothing back. So if we send a request, ta-da, have a look, we've got 200, and look, we've got all of our customers. So I think, yeah, full bar is there, but each time that we restart the application, we get new customer. And you can see that this is working with JDBC template. Next, let me go ahead and teach this row mapper because it's so important that you understand what is happening.